Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. In this episode, Corbin and I consider what artificial intelligence has to say about exercise and aging. We ask ChatGPT the question, what exercises should aging adults be doing to maintain bone and muscle mass, health, physical activity, and longevity? All right, so Corbin, we're back to another episode of the Aging Well podcast. What do you think we should talk about today?
You know, there's a number of things that we can talk about, but our last few podcasts that have actually been pretty successful, you kind of pick the artificial intelligent brain of ChatGPT, and I'm thinking, why don't we just capitalize on that? Which is interesting that you choose to go ChatGPT. I feel like a lot of other college professors are turning away from that, but you're liking some of the subjects and the topics that it comes up with. It's actually a pretty good tool and a good resource.
Well, I think as long as you have the mindset to be able to evaluate what it says and realize that it is not the supreme all-knowing, and that there are things that it can get right or it can get wrong. And that's the reason why I like bringing it up on this podcast is because it's a tool that people can use to get some information pretty quickly where they don't know where to go. And maybe we can just kind of help to tease through some of that information a little bit and refine it somewhat to give it what I called in, I think it was the episode with Dr. Joffrey, I referred to it as emotional intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence.
Oh, okay.
And so we could kind of put our human mind to it as well. And so what do you want to ask him today?
Let's ask it, what exercises should adults be doing to maintain bone and muscle mass, health, physical activity, more importantly, longevity?
Sounds good. And see what ChatGPT comes back with. Kind of opens with, aging adults can benefit from a combination of exercises that focus on maintaining bone and muscle mass, promoting overall physical health, and enhancing longevity. And it begins with a list of types of exercises and activities. And it's a list of about 13 activities. So let's just start with number one.
Number one looks like it's strength training, which is funny because that's like the number one thing that we promote here on this podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I'm so glad they came up with strength training as number one instead of cardio. And actually aerobic exercise is down at 5. So what's it say about strength training? And I think actually we may want to, depending on how things go today, maybe either talk a little bit about what a prescription should look like for an older adult or maybe have a separate podcast episode on just that precisely.
I think that's a great idea. I think a lot of people might be listening to our podcast and they're like, well, that's great. I know what to do to be healthy, but can you give me a freebie? Can you give me a workout plan? So that might be a good thing to just kind of throw at the listeners.
Yeah, I just took a friend out to his gym at his country club the other day to show him how to use the equipment. He's like, I don't know what to do. And I think that's a lot of the American population. They want to exercise. They maybe have access to exercise equipment, but they're not quite sure what to do. And unfortunately, you have some of these commercial gyms that don't really promote exercise education. They just, here's your machines. We'll take your money and enjoy.
That's so fascinating. I actually have a lot of friends that are in the same category. And I just thought, it's a generational thing. But if you have friends that are around your age that still don't know how to use exercise equipment, that blows my mind. And that's why I think it's important for parents to start their kids early in sports or whatever. Anyways, back to the podcast. Strength training. Resistance exercise such as weightlifting or using resistance band help maintain and build muscle mass. Focus on all major muscle groups, including legs, arms, chest, back, and core. Aim for at least 2 days of strength training per week, working with a weight or resistance level that challenges you but allows you to perform 8 to 12 repetitions per set.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about the number of days per week and the repetition scheme a few times on the podcast. And I tend to disagree. I'm much more of a higher frequency of strength training per week. I think recoverability isn't as bad as we tend to think it is, especially if we're going to be splitting up the routine so that we can manage our time a little bit better. I do think minimum of 2 days of strength training per week, but really 3 days, 4 days is to me more the minimum. 6 days is probably a bit more what I would consider the ideal. And in terms of the repetitions, what do you think of that 8 to 12 repetition scheme?
Well, there's no denying that 8 to 12 repetitions is backed by research and studies that are out there. It's great for hypertrophy training. It's also transitioning into the muscle endurance. But again, how many sets are you doing? You're just doing 1 set? Are you doing 2 sets? It just says 8 to 12, but it's not providing you with a set of how many you need to do, right?
Yeah. Well, if you go with the ACSM guidelines, it's going to be at the 2 to 3 sets. It's typical now. It used to be just 1 set, but you said it's backed by the science. I'm not convinced that it's really backed by the science. I mean, if you really look at the exercise science over the years, it has not been done from a perspective of what is best for overall performance. It's kind of a bit more of what's better for convenience, what's safer. 8 to 12 repetitions is a rather generic number. It's going to give you the better range of hypertrophy, but personally, I lean more toward the number 5 because 5 is going to give you a little bit better strength as well as still giving you hypertrophy as long as you're doing sufficient sets. And we've talked a lot about the 5x5. I think that's a pretty good starting point, and that's why like Mark Ripito and others have really promoted more of a 5x5 or a 5x3 program. So 3 sets of 5 repetitions for starting strength. That's Mark Ripito's kind of foundational strength training program is starting strength. And so when you're starting out, I kind of like that 5x5 because you're not doing so many repetitions that you're maybe getting bored or your technique begins to break down as you're fatiguing and you are underscoring poor technique. You're able to manage technique. You're able to push enough load that you're getting stronger and you get enough volume that you're going to still get some hypertrophy. So I think you get a better strength option when you're doing 5x5 as opposed to, say, a 3x8 or 3x12.
Yeah, but I think it's also important to note that in that 5x5, you are lifting a lot heavier than you would.
Not necessarily. I mean, it depends on your approach. And, I think one thing that people tend to not understand when it comes to resistance training is what is heavy. I think, I got to lift heavy, and they see the big burly guy at the gym that's deadlifting 800 pounds. Well, that might not necessarily be heavy to him. That could be 80% of his maximum, and he's just repping out on it because he's warming up. He's a beast, and he's able to lift that. Heavy to you is what is near your maximum. And if you can barely lift the bar, then some variation that might be a fraction of that weight of the bar is going to be heavy for you. And so that's the key is you want to be lifting a resistance that is heavy enough for you to do it in proper form, but promote strength and hypertrophy adaptations.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
I just feel like most people are going to lift lighter with the 8x12, just a little lighter. And then when that fatigue does come in, they can focus a little bit more on, okay, what's happening with my body as I'm fatiguing. And then once they've mastered that technique down and they get that motor memory, then with a 5x5 program of lifting heavier with good proper form, proper technique, I feel like that would be more beneficial. I feel like starting off with a lighter rep range of that 8 to 12, that's just my personal opinion though.
Well, since when? You've been talking 5x5 on this program for some time.
I love 5x5.
But if you look at like the 5x, started the Strong Lifts 5x5 program. They basically start you out with minimal amount of weight. And so it may be on the squat, a 45-pound, Olympic bar on your back. Might even less if you're older and, not as strong. But you start with the 45-pound and then you add, as you're able to do the 5 sets of 5 repetitions, you add 5 pounds. Next workout, you add another 5 pounds. And rather quickly, if you're progressing that way, theoretically, you can add 5 pounds. Well, on the squat, you're doing it 3 times a week, so you're adding 15 pounds a week. You can't quite keep up with that rate of progression. But if you kept up with that rate of progression, you're like squatting well over 300 pounds by the time the year ends.
It's good.
And so it is progressive overload, but it's maintaining a technique that is not going to break down as you're doing the lift. And it's also going to allow you to lift a little bit heavier that you're actually promoting strength. Because a lot of people, they might do 8 to 10 repetitions, but they're not lifting really even significant enough weight to be able to stimulate muscle hypertrophy. I have no fault with the 8 to 12 range. And I think for bodybuilding, it's probably a bit more ideal, although you see about a mixed reviews in the bodybuilding community, everything from Reg Park's, more of a 5x5 program up to really high volume, German high volume training now. So it's a start. And if that's what you prefer, I think that works fine. I think ultimately we want to be doing probably at least somewhere in the neighborhood of about 25 repetitions in a workout for the given body part. But so I think we'll have to dive in a little bit deeper into the strength training and more specific kind of what exercises to do and things like that. And it might be beyond just the scope and time of today's podcast. But definitely, one of the priority things that anybody should be doing as they're aging, whether they're in, and I would say first age, second age, third age, and even if in fourth age, you can continue to be lifting weights, strength training should be a top priority.
Yep.
Because that's going to allow us to maintain that greater amount of muscle mass, which means greater functionality. Our bone mineral density is going to be higher, so we're less likely to have osteoporosis and other issues that can come from even other activities that we might consider healthy, but that don't tend to maintain the bone and mineral mass densities that we want. Let's go on to number 2.
Number 2.
Number 2 kind of ties in with the strength training, but broadens it even a little bit further.
Yeah, no, it really does. Number 2, weight-bearing activities. Weight-bearing activities like walking, hiking, dancing, and stair climbing are excellent for bone health as they help to stimulate bone density. Aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity weight-bearing aerobic activities per week.
Yeah, so they're kind of bridging the gap there between the strength and the aerobic exercise. And as we will later jump down to number 5 and it talks about aerobic exercise, it gives that same ACSM guidance for at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity activity per week. But what they're looking at is emphasizing the weight-bearing type of activity. So rather than doing stationary cycling or rowing, those types of exercises, emphasizing a little bit more walking, running, those types of activities that are going to give a little bit more stress to the bones, which can make a little bit of an argument against swimming for an aerobic exercise. But I think for a lot of the older adults, that aerobic activity has to be determined by what your current physical capabilities are. And for many older adults or aging adults, swimming is actually a very, very good activity for supporting the body's weight so that you can move and stress the heart and the muscles a little bit more. It's not going to be as impactive on the bone mineral density. So we want to do things that require us to be on our feet, having a little bit more of those ground reaction forces that are stimulating the bone to grow. Because Wolff's Law, remember from physiology,
Yep.
is that the bone is going to respond to the stresses applied to it by depositing more bone mineral density in those areas. And so the more we're using and stressing our bones, the more we're either going to contribute to bone mineral density, or at least as we age, offset any loss that we might see with the aging process.
So just in that statement alone, that's why I feel like it's so beneficial for young children to start early in some form of physical activity. Especially if it's a weight bearing activity. I think gymnastics is a great start. It kind of hits this all together. You being a wrestler, I feel like wrestling would be a good, or just any type of sport movement, whatever the case may be, it has benefit at an early age, strengthening those muscles, strengthening that bone density. Get it while the kids are, their bodies are developing, and then, like, we use the analogy of a bank account, right? We're making those early deposits to carry on into our later years. But instead of money, it's our physical health.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's great. And then also, I think the 150 minutes a week, I think that's totally doable, totally obtainable. Anyone can go hiking on a Saturday, or first thing in the morning. It's doable, it's attainable, it's fairly free, fairly cheap. I don't know. I think that's an easy goal to have someone continue doing that in their later years.
Yeah.
Speaking of later years, number 3, balance and stability exercises. Engage in balance and stability exercises to reduce the risk of falls. This includes activities like yoga, tai chi, and specific balance drills. Balance exercises can be performed daily or integrated into your routine. From personal experience, when I was an activities director and I developed that exercise program at that assisted living, the number one thing that I focused on besides resistance training was actually helping balance and stability exercises. And it carried forward a very long way, to the point where certain people were using their walkers less or their canes less. Individuals that were using a wheelchair, they could sit up and help the nursing staff like pull themselves out of that nursing chair if they had to go to the restroom or whatever the case may be. I'm really a huge advocate for balance and stability exercises, especially in the third or fourth age. I think that's a key critical factor, specifically that fourth age.
So I have a mixed response to the idea of balance and stability specific exercises for anybody, particularly the aging adult. I think, first of all, when we talk balance and stability, you cannot have balance and stability without having proper amount of strength,
right,
and having a proper amount of posture. A number of podcasts back, when I had Carmine Arpaio on, we brought up Carmine's law, which is basically that strength plus posture equals balance. And we oftentimes try and work from the balance side of the equation rather than the strength or posture side. And I think that can be a huge shortcoming in a lot of the workouts, because we tell these people, okay, stand on one foot on a Basu ball to develop your balance. And yet they have no strength to be able to actually maintain that balance. You're going to go a lot further by doing the basic core exercises and strengthening the core. By core exercises, we mean our basic five, the squat, deadlift variation, the horizontal pull. Well, going to go more than the five. If I go horizontal pull, horizontal push, vertical push, and doing carries, those being our core exercise. And then core being the muscles that kind of engage us in balance. And I generally will go to the spiral line principle for that. That basically the core runs from the neck all the way through the ankles and back up. It's that kind of double helix that runs through the body of muscles that helps to stabilize and support the body. And if the muscles are strong, then those smaller muscles are able to engage a little bit more effectively to stabilize and to balance the body. But if we go and work the small muscles first, we're not going to have the balance and stability that we necessarily need. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So I'm not a big fan of a lot of the exercises that people continue to do for balance. Though I would say from this list, you look at yoga, Tai Chi, and some balance drills may be useful in developing balance for the older population. But I think one of the big keys first is build strength, strengthen the muscles that are going to improve posture. That allows one to have a balance that then could be developed a little bit further.
Well, they kind of go hand in glove. And I feel like you're 100% correct in the fact that you can't just do balance without strength, right? A lot of those balance and stability exercises, they started by strengthening the hips with those, with that community I was working with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the most dramatic changes were taking place, was starting with strengthening the hips and then working on the core muscles and then the other stabilizing, like moving outwards.
And I think that's what we're trying to get the listener to understand is that when we talk balance and stability exercises, we're not talking about standing on an unstable surface on one foot,
right?
Standing on a Basu ball, especially doing squats and things like that on a Basu ball, again, really stupid. But doing the exercises that permit us to have better balance and stability. And you're right, that begins with the hip muscles. So doing any kind of multi-directional hip work, working on, the muscles of the lower body, of the core. And then, as you strengthen those muscles, then you're going to be better able to engage the ankle muscles and things like that by standing on something that is less stable. Because the hip is firing in order to do the bulk of that stabilization work. The core muscles are firing in order to do the bulk of that work.
Like an inverted funnel.
Right, the inverted funnel, John Propier's inverted funnel principle. We'll have to kind of maybe come back to that at some point too and talk more. I'm good with balance and stability exercises, but especially as I look at numbers 1, 2, and 3 on ChatGPT's list: strength training, weight bearing activities, balance and stability exercises. I really feel like the three of those all kind of dovetail together and should be all inclusive. So when we're doing strength training exercises, we want to keep in mind that they should be weight bearing exercises and they should be exercises that are going to contribute to balance and stability.
No, I agree. Let's dive into number 5.
No, 4.
Number 4, flexibility and stretching. Stretching exercises improve joint flexibility, range of motion. Incorporate stretching into your daily routine or as a part of your warm-up / cool down during workouts. Yoga and Pilates are an excellent option for flexibility and balance.
Now, when I get to, and I talk about this all the time in classes, when it comes to flexibility and stretching, I am not the best about contributing a significant amount of time specifically to flexibility exercises. And the reason being is I have a limited amount of time for exercise. And if a priority is going to be my strength training exercises, they're going to contribute to my overall health and physical performance and things like that, then that's got to take up the bulk of the time that I'm contributing to exercise. And when I do stretching and flexibility, that takes time away from either calories being burned or muscles being built or maintained. And so I don't focus as much on flexibility specifically. I don't have a stretching routine. I do wish that I had a little bit more access and willingness to kind of do a little bit more yoga or Pilates type of work, but I don't necessarily do that. But what I do is when I do those weight bearing strength training exercises, I do them through a full range of motion. And when you're loading the muscle in the joint through a full range of motion, you are helping to maintain the adequate level of flexibility that you need. Now, in some situations, you may need more flexibility than you don't, but most of us that are aging and we're done with athletics, we're not doing gymnastics, not wrestling anymore, any of that kind of stuff. I don't need quite as much stretching and flexibility as long as I'm working through that full range of motion. So I don't know what your position is on that.
I kind of go back and forth. I agree with you. If you're doing a time crunch, maybe dynamic stretching is going to be more beneficial. But there's also a lot of there's a lot of studies that are out there that flexibility is huge, especially for that aging population. We take for granted the importance of being flexible enough to tie our shoes. We take advantage, or we're naive to the level of flexibility that we have to reach something up on the top shelf without it being uncomfortable, or picking something up off the ground. I know that seems silly because, well, that easily ties back to strength, and you'd be correct with that. But there is a certain level of flexibility that allows us to properly go through that range of motion. I've always been an advocate for strength and flexibility, because I feel like they also go hand in glove. But at the same time, as far as stretching goes, I'll admit I don't do it as often as I should. So
Well, there's two things there. I mean, for one thing, if you have a limited range of motion, what is the definition of flexibility? It is the ability to move a joint through a pain-free range of motion. And so if you have pain through a range of motion, that has to be dealt with.
right.
And that could be may need to be dealt with through stretching. And so if you don't have the mobility, the range of motion to be able to do the exercises through their proper full range of motion, you got to stretch. You got to do something in order to improve upon that. But once you have developed an adequate range of motion to be able to perform the basic functional movements of life, then there's not as much of a need to continue with a stretching program. Start doing more exercises that are going to be loading the muscle through that full range of motion. And so you can get a pretty good stretch of the body doing the basic movement patterns that we do in our strengthening exercises. But I agree with you that if you're lacking mobility and range of motion, you need to address those. That the exercise itself is not going to address those, because either you're going to have to go excessively light in the lifting to be able to get through that range of motion, or you're going to simply not go through the range of motion, and you're going to progressively get worse and worse, and your form is just going to get worse and worse.
Now, one thing I did think about, maybe you may not have the answer for this, but I do know that there's some research that is out there that states the benefit of stretching after an exercise, especially when you have, a pump. You got good blood flow to that muscle, and that muscle's tight and constricted. By stretching that out, now you're allowing more blood to travel throughout the entire portion of that muscle, and the connecting muscles allowing more nutrients to come to help recover. Do you know anything about that, or is that all hoopla?
Do I know anything about
I'm just saying, is it?
What do I do for a living? But I would say, there's a little bit of mixed truth in there. I mean, when we talk about stretching, I would wholeheartedly agree. Stretching needs to be done after the activity. And the reason we do it after the activity is because the body is warmed, the blood is flowing, and we are able to capitalize on the more plasticity of the connective tissues. It means that they're able to elongate and stretch and then hold that stretch. Whereas if we stretch before exercise, we have a tendency for that cold connective tissue to be more elastic, so it stretches but just recoils back to its original shape. So the warm-up should be a bit more of a dynamic activity, whereas the stretching should be done at the end of exercise. And it's not a matter of getting blood flow to the muscles, because we've already done that through the workout. And part of the cool down should be more active, dynamic movement to maintain a little bit more of that blood flow to help remove some of the metabolites and things that might have built up in the muscle, get more oxygen to kind of reoxygenate the muscle after exercise. But that blood flow isn't doing anything to help with the flexibility. And by stretching, we're not doing anything to really increase the blood flow dramatically. That's going to come more through dynamic movement patterns. Because think about it, I mean, stretching, and especially if you're passively stretching, there's not really any necessary muscle engagement. And so there's no demand for oxygen. There's just simply we're moving a warmed tissue through a fuller range of motion and developing better stretching.
So through that dynamic motion, would you say that would be more of an aerobic style? Which brings us to number 5.
Oh, wait, you're talking about aerobic style flexibility?
Yeah.
No, I would make the argument that we talk the principle of specificity. The body makes specific adaptations to impose demands. And when we look at health-related components of physical fitness, we have cardiorespiratory endurance, we have muscle endurance, we have muscle strength, we have flexibility, and we have body composition. And when I demonstrate kind of the exercise continuum to my students, I'll point out that flexibility really is contributed to through that entire spectrum. Whether we're doing low intensity cardiovascular, as long as we're doing it through a full range of motion, if I'm moving regularly in my lifetime through a full range of motion, if I'm not avoiding reaching for something on the top shelf, which being 6'5", I'm always the one that's being asked to get the thing off the top shelf. So it's not as much of a stretch for me. But, stretching up, stretching down, those things are helping me at a very low intensity level to be maintaining and developing my flexibility. But on the other end of that spectrum, when we get into pure strength, heaviest of lifting, still doing that through a full range of motion, that load is pushing me down eccentrically. It's going to help me stretch a little bit. And oftentimes when we do a heavy lift, we kind of take advantage of that stretch reflex to help push the weight back up. So flexibility kind of runs that whole continuum. So we don't identify it as aerobic flexibility, strength flexibility, or just simply flexibility. And I put little air quotes around that. But does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. I also was trying to do a good segue into number 5.
Yeah, you kind of failed on the segue.
I messed up on that one.
Now we've segued
into number 5, which is aerobic exercise. Cardiovascular activities like brisk walking, cycling, swimming, or low-impact aerobics help improve cardiovascular health, endurance, and lung function. Aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity or 75 minutes of vigorous aerobic exercise per week.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt we need aerobic exercise. And, I think the exercise science profession for many years did a injustice to its consumers by overemphasizing aerobic exercise. And I know that sounds very bad to say that, we should diminish aerobic exercise, but I would favor strength over aerobic exercise because strength training exercise gives us that capacity to be able to do more physical activity. And one of the biggest goals as we are aging is just simply to maintain physical activity. And so that could be low intensity type of just activity, movement, going out hiking, walking, doing more activity. But then from the standpoint of developing our cardiorespiratory health, that's going to require a little bit higher intensity. That's where we get into really specific, vigorous or moderate intensity activities for that 75 or 150 minutes per week, respectively. And so I do think we need to contribute a fair amount of time per week to aerobic exercise. It really depends on where we are starting from. If we just started to initiate a cardiorespiratory endurance program, obviously it's going to require a longer duration of lower intensity until we build up our level of kind of adherence to it, but also our tolerance to the exercise, building up our muscular capacity to be able to do something like, if we're going for a run or something like that. For most of us aging, I would generally recommend more of a brisk walk over a run just for joint health and overall benefit. But whatever activities we choose, and again, the choice should be the activity that we are going to enjoy and we're going to do often. And as we do it, we want to get to the point where we're having to do it for less time rather than more time. And so that's ramping up the intensity, doing a bit more high intensity interval training as opposed to lower, long-term, low intensity, steady state type of exercise. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. Hit over lists any day.
Okay. Number 6, functional strength training. I hate this phrase. And I just underscore that. I wish we would stop saying functional strength training. This is exercises that mimic activities of daily living, such as squatting, lifting, and reaching. This can improve your ability to perform everyday tasks independently. Isn't that just what we talked about with strength training?
Yeah.
Squat, deadlift variation, row, bench, overhead press, carries. That's strength training. And so this idea of there being some other kind of strength training that is more functional than what the traditional weightlifters do, I think to me is just bullshit. I understand some of where the terminology comes in. I think a lot of times people think functional strength training, that's doing all that crap on a Basu ball. And, but again, if we are looking at numbers 1, 2, and 3, and even 4, that's functional strength training. We are strengthening our muscles purposefully. We're doing weight-bearing type of activities as opposed to more machine-based type of exercise. We're doing exercises that are going to contribute to balance and stability as well as flexibility. So just cut out number 6 and let's do away with this whole term.
Well, do you think number 6 is specifically based off of like our 7 main exercises, right? The squat, the hinge, the overhead press, the vertical press, just that giving that body that overall function versus bicep curls and tricep curls. Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I mean, you can make an argument that a bicep curl is functional. I would agree that the accessory exercises become a little less functional and a bit more aesthetics. But again, if we're going to talk about strength training, let's emphasize the core exercises that are going to develop that overall strength, balance, stability, flexibility, and then add in any accessories as we have time that might give us a little bit better appearance. But, if they're saying squatting, okay, well, the squat is the squat. Lifting and reaching. Well, lifting is weightlifting. I think ChatGPT kind of botched the phrasing there. But when we look at like reaching, so when you say reaching, lifting, to me, I hear for reaching a stretch on the muscle, so eccentric contractions, lifting concentric contractions. And so working through a range of motion, we're both pushing and we're pulling. We're stretching the muscle, we're shortening the muscle. That is the kind of exercises that we should be doing, and that is what's going to make us much more functional.
Seems like ChatGPT doesn't lift.
I guess not. Dude, do you even lift?
Do you even lift?
I'm sure ChatGPT skips leg day too. All right, how about the next one, number 7, low impact exercises. What's it say about low impact exercises?
Low impact exercises like water aerobic or stationary cycling are easier on the joints and are suitable for those with joint pain or arthritis. I feel like that kind of ties in with the aerobic exercise though, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think, when we look at the capacity to do aerobic type of activity, so we're talking about activities that are going to elevate our heart to a more moderate or vigorous intensity, and we're going to do that multiple times per week. When we look at low impact versus high impact type of activities, you have to consider, what are we trying to accomplish? There is benefit to certain amount of impact in the exercise because that does help to build some of the bone mineral density. But there's also a bit of a downside to that higher impact because it does put more stress on the joints and requires a bit more recovery from that. And so for most of us, if we are aging and we're not participating in any sport that requires higher impact activities, the more lower impact activity we can do that will benefit the cardiovascular system, the better. But I don't think we have to do solely low impact. I think you have to kind of weigh it. Where am I at physically and in my own condition levels for the exercise that I might be doing? And this might be something where you need to kind of consult the professional. What is best for me in this particular scenario? So for many older adults, especially if you have joint pain, arthritis, getting in the pool, swimming, or doing stationary cycling, those types of activities are going to be a little bit better because you're stressing the heart a bit more and you're not putting that undue load on the joints.
Right. And which I think that's the main goal, is to have it not hurt the joints. So, but I guess I don't like the phrasing of this. Is it low impact in a steady state? So if you're stationary on a bike, you're just maintaining a specific speed for a specific amount of time? Or can you do kind of like a fartlek style where you're playing with the speed? You're cranking the intensity up and then you're slowing it down, and then you crank it up and you slow it down? Or is that going to be more of that interval style? I just feel like it's a low impact.
Well, that's going to bring us into number 8, which is interval training. But impact is just impact. So you're basically talking about the nature of the movement that you're doing. Is it impacting, where you are raising your body weight off of the ground and then coming back and impacting the ground or some kind of surface? Or is it something that is having less impactive response? And so if you are stationary cycling, you can do that at a steady state for a prolonged period of time, or you can vary the intensities over time. It's still going to be low impact. And so I think that's the differentiation there, that, we want to do activities that are going to be most healthful to our joints and not put undue stress on the joints. And so in some situations, you know, cycling, swimming might be a little bit more appropriate. It's another way too that we can increase the volume of cardiovascular exercise that we can do over a week. If running causes us a lot of undue stress, but we want to train for, say, a 5K race or something like that, we can improve our cardiovascular system or cardiorespiratory system by running a little bit less, but substituting some of that running for more low impact exercise.
So one of the things that I've heard from my clients back in the day is when they would join those water aerobic classes, if they've had surgery and possibly had like a knee replacement or a hip replacement and have any form of metal in their body, by them going into a pool, it completely affects their body temperature throughout the day. And maybe we're kind of going off course by me asking this, but would water aerobics be beneficial if it kind of puts someone in a shocked state every time they go in there?
I'm not following the shock state.
They just, I don't know.
You're talking about they're going into too cold of water?
Yeah, not even too cold water. It'd be normal temperature, but for them, almost every single client that I had that had some form of metal in their body, once they went into the water, they would always complain like, "Oh, it's way colder after that surgery," or it's, I can't warm up afterwards. It's just an interesting.
That's beyond my scope of expertise.
I see. I knew it was going to go down the wrong.
Be a little bit more psychosomatic.
Yeah.
Because the water temperature isn't that dramatically different than the external temperature, or should not be. And it's not like it's you're sticking your limb, your hip replacement in the freezer for 30 minutes while you exercise, and it's going to hold on to that cold for throughout the day. So I don't know. I'd have to look into that a little bit more, but I would speculate that that's a little bit more probably psychosomatic.
Okay.
And if it makes you feel a little bit cooler throughout the day, well, just throw on a little extra clothes.
Got you.
And when we look at individuals who maybe have multiple sclerosis, that cooler temperature is actually going to be much more beneficial to them. And so if that is the case, that water type of activity lowers the body temperature for a more sustained period of time, then that's going to be even more beneficial for somebody who has multiple sclerosis. So I don't see that being an issue. I would think that a far more critical issue for anybody exercising would be a prolonged elevated body temperature as opposed to a lower body temperature, because the heart is not going to have to be pumping as much at a lower body temperature than it would at a higher body temperature. And so it's going to be less stressful on the heart overall, especially if somebody has heart issues.
Cool. Well, thanks for answering that. Interval training. Consider incorporating interval training into your routine. Short bursts of high intensity exercises followed by rest or low intensity period can boost cardiovascular fitness and burn calories efficiently. A huge advocate for interval training.
Yeah, and again, when you talk interval training and the intensities involved, we have to remember that intensity is relative. And so we're basically just varying between what is a lower intensity for us and a high intensity that is for us. And so what your intervals might be at, say, you're going a high of 80% down to a low of, say, 50% of your maximum. It's going to be different for an elite marathoner than it's going to be for some 80-year-old grandmother who hasn't been exercising in 40 years. And so keep that in mind. And what the interval training allows us to do is actually to spend more time in higher intensity in a shorter duration type of workout. It also is going to have benefits in terms of burning calories much more effectively. Because when we do slow, steady state, we tend to burn the calories during the activity. We have a very rapid, rather brief cool down period where our oxygen consumption returns back to baseline pretty quickly, and then we're back to our normal basal metabolic rate. But there's been a significant amount of research within interval training where the nature of that training actually elevates oxygen consumption for a more prolonged period of time post-exercise. And so we're actually burning more calories even though we've exercised for a shorter period of time.
No, and you feel it too.
Yeah.
It may be a shorter period, but man.
Even if you're doing quote unquote Tabata. All right, number 9, circuit training.
Circuit training involves a series of strength or aerobic exercises performed in sequence. It combines cardio and strength training for a comprehensive workout.
That's a bit dated to be saying that circuit training benefits the cardiovascular system and the strength system. I think it's got to almost be one or the other. When we talk circuit training, I think there's benefits to it. And again, for the same reasons that I think interval training is good, in that circuit training, or what probably more modern terminology would be to call it HIRT, high intensity resistance training, or high intensity interval resistance training, is going to put a little bit more load on the muscle. It's not going to produce a great amount of muscle hypertrophy. It's not going to produce a great amount of strength gain, but it does improve the overall muscle functioning, muscle endurance. It's going to have good benefits for cardiorespiratory endurance, but not great. And it's going to improve body composition. So I think if your main goals are just general fitness and you're trying to maintain your cardiovascular health, you're just trying to lose some body fat and keep the muscles active, a circuit training approach or more of a HIRT approach can be pretty beneficial because you are going to burn a little bit more calories doing that. But it's also, for the sake of time, it's also a good way to do it. Now, you can do circuits. Rather than call them circuit training, I would call it more of a, doing more exercise complexes or supersets where you do multiple exercises in sequence, no rest in between, and then maybe rest a little bit, do another sequence. Those can be beneficial for building muscle hypertrophy, depending on how you kind of set up your rep scheme. So circuit training is going to be of some benefit. It's not going to be the best for hypertrophy. It's not going to be the best for cardiorespiratory, but it's going to be good.
And I know we've talked about it in the past, but what's an ideal rest period in between the circuit for those that are just tuning in and listening?
Well, if you're doing a circuit, really theoretically, there's no rest. Old school Nautilus principles, it used to be anywhere from about 10 to 12 exercises, absolutely no rest in between. I mean, you literally just got off one machine, you crawled to the next one, and you did your repetitions, and you moved to the next one. So the rest would be maybe about 15 seconds or so as you're moving from exercise to exercise, changing the weight on the subsequent machine, and there's very little rest in between. Now, if you're doing some circuits where you might be doing multiple exercises and then you're repeating them for multiple sets, then you might go anywhere from, I'd say, probably about 1 to 3 minutes rest in between those sets, really depending on what you're trying to accomplish, how you're trying to feel, how much energy you're going to need to get through to that next circuit. So there's no hard and fast rules in terms of that.
Okay, nailed it. Number 10, mind-body practices. Engage in mindfulness practices like meditation or deep breathing exercises to reduce stress, improve mental well-being, and promote longevity. Now, when I heard mind-body practices, I was thinking it was the mind-muscle connection.
Yeah.
But then
That's definitely different. I mean, it goes along with that. I mean, you always want to be connecting your mind and your body, whether it's in your strengthening exercises, your cardiovascular exercise, thinking about what am I doing, what muscle movements am I trying to accomplish here. But mind-body practices is really just kind of lowering some of that physiology in the body, restoring it back down to a more resting homeostasis through deep breathing exercises, doing things that are going to relieve stress, try and just kind of overall focus on I would say, both spiritual and emotional well-being of the body.
I would agree. Yeah, I think that this one is actually really important because it's not just what you can do physically, like you said, mentally, emotionally, spiritually as well. And this doesn't just carry. It's just, this isn't something you can bring to the gym and it just stays at the gym. This is an actual technique that you can carry forward in all daily aspects of regular living, whether it's work, dealing with family, dealing with traffic in a stressful scenario. This is something that can carry forward for the rest of your life, honestly. Outdoor activities for number 11, spending time in nature and engaging in outdoor activities like gardening, hiking, or playing sports can enhance both physical and mental health.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a no-brainer. And I think, if we go back to talking about the aerobic exercise, the low impact exercise, and, interval training, circuit training, all that kind of stuff, the more we can do that kind of cardiorespiratory activity outdoors, the more beneficial it's going to ultimately be. And too often, I think people will hop in their car, drive to the gym, and then walk on a treadmill when they could have just walked around their neighborhood. And I think it's much better to get outdoors. But getting outdoors has to go even beyond just our exercise practices. We need more physical activity outside, just more activity in general. And like they say, gardening, hiking, and so on, that can be done outdoors. So get outside, get some sun, get some fresh air, and enjoy that.
I don't think gardening is a exercise. Landscaping, yes, but gardening.
Well, what's the difference between landscaping and gardening?
Intensity and what you're doing. I don't know. I picture gardening like someone just taking a little tiny miniature spade, digging it in, and planting a plant in
there's
there.
Probably a whole bunch of gardeners right now that just want to jump through their speakers at you right now because it really depends on what you're doing. But gardening is really, again, working on the garden. It's small scale farming in certain cases.
That's a good. That's a good argument.
I mean, you can make the argument. Well, farming is hard work when you're driving a combine. So you want to make it an activity both for the enjoyment aspect of it, but also the physical aspect of it as well. Whether you're doing vigorous gardening, landscaping, or just, planting posies in the backyard.
Now, this one, number 12, stay active throughout the day. Avoid prolonged sitting, stand up, stretch, and move around regularly, even if it's just for a few minutes. I got to get better at this. I feel like at one point, even, I don't know, 3 years ago before the pandemic, I was actually pretty active. I never sat at work. I would stand all day. I'd move around. And then once the world decided to have a global pandemic, I became more stationary and I sat more, and I don't know. I'm getting bad. I got to get back into not sitting.
Yeah, I think we can all find ways to be more active throughout the day. I don't think the answer is standing up all day. Remember, we went through that period in society where, the
sitting is the new smoking.
Yeah, sitting was the new smoking, and you needed a standing desk. And then they realized that standing for a long period of time was every bit as bad as sitting for a long period of time, because all that blood flow is just flowing down into your legs and, causing problems with your feet. And, people would be getting back issues and all kind of different stuff.
Treadmill desk.
It's not staying stationary for a prolonged period of time, getting up and moving around. If you're still working, so if you're in that second phase of life, have walking meetings, or you're getting out with friends rather than sitting around having a drink. Go walk around the neighborhood. Get out and move as much as possible is the key here. Last but not least, we have consult a professional. I think ChatGPT always does this. I think it's a little bit of that tag to prevent any kind of lawsuits coming back when they give any kind of exercise advice and so on. But they're always saying, and it is good advice, consider working with a fitness trainer, physical therapist, or healthcare provider who specializes in geriatric exercise to create a safe and effective exercise plan tailored to your needs and limitations. And, we can go back to the use of that geriatric term when we talked about Don't Call Me a Senior in one of our previous episodes. We talked about geriatric really being linked to people in that more declining aspect of life. And, when we talk about considering a fitness trainer, I think if you look at somebody who is going to look at you as a geriatric, old, frail adult, you're not going to get the best exercise prescription from them. You want a professional who is going to look at the potential that you still have left in you, whatever age and capability you are, and know exercise from the broadest sense. An exercise prescription does not change because you're old and frail. It just has to be refined based on the principle of specificity, overload, and progression based on your current abilities and your medical history and health.
To wrap it all up, going off of what Dr. Armstrong was saying, always consult with your healthcare provider before starting a new exercise program, especially if you have any underlying health conditions or concerns. They can provide guidance and recommendations specific to your individual health status. Additionally, remember that consistency is key, and it's never too late to start or continue an exercise routine to support bone, muscle health, physical activity, and longevity.
And I would definitely underscore that aspect, that it's never too late to start, and also important to continue. So that consistency, that dedication is all very important in terms of developing an exercise program that is not only going to help you maintain your bone and mineral mass, improve your health or maintain your health, maintain your physical activity and longevity, but it's also going to help you to
age well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well. If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers.